My name is David. I was born and raised in New York. Growing up, I lived with my dad, mom, and younger sister, making us a family of four. My dad was a salesman at a securities company. He had a good sales record at work and made good money. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but my dad's earnings were more than enough to support us. Following my parents' wishes, I ended up taking entrance exams for private middle schools and got into one. It wasn't exactly a prestigious school, but there were definitely a lot of kids from wealthy families, and some students boasted of being slightly rich. I always thought it was wrong to brag about money, especially since I hadn't earned it myself. Kevin, who was a grade above me, was the kind of guy who liked to one-up me, and he was often annoying me. Even though we were in different grades, our middle school was big on mixed grade activities. We did extracurriculars, cleaning duties, and even had lunch in mixed age groups. It would have been fine if I could interact with respectable seniors or cute juniors, but unfortunately, I always ended up in the same group as Kevin, which really bummed me out. One day, during cleaning time, we were cleaning the art room. Of course, with my mixed age group, including Kevin.
Hey David, your dad drives a cheap family car, right? My family has a fancy foreign car.
I was just trying to get the cleaning done quickly and was wiping the tables efficiently. But Kevin, he wasn't lifting a finger, started this conversation. Don't know. I'm not interested in cars. Don't even know what kind my dad has.
You're just pretending not to know because you don't want to admit it. Whatever, it's clear my family is richer.
I didn't care about who was wealthier, but then I remembered something and walked over to the blackboard in the art room, picked up a piece of chalk. By the way, my dad's car had this symbol on it. I drew the symbol that was on the front of my dad's car on the blackboard with chalk, and a classmate in our cleaning group said, "Oh, that's a Mercedes-Benz, right?" That moment made me realize, so that's what it is. Kevin heard this and got angry. "What's with you all of a sudden? You're just showing off now. That's a low blow, man. You're the worst." I thought Kevin was the real problem, but I didn't say anything because I didn't want to start a fight. I just kept cleaning quietly. After that incident, Kevin seemed to target me even more. I heard from a classmate later that Kevin's family car was actually a lower model than ours. I didn't care, but it seemed to bother Kevin. He always seemed eager to look down on me. It was not just about money, but also about test scores and the number of presents I received for my birthday. I couldn't wait for Kevin to graduate. But then I remembered our school was combined junior high and high school, so he would still be around me, even in high school, which was a real downer. Then, in the summer, I was in 8th grade and Kevin was in 9th. Something happened that would give Kevin even more ammunition against me. There was one incident where I was completely looked down upon by Kevin. My parents got divorced. My dad was a salesman with good performance, definitely the outgoing personality type. Although the term outgoing personality might not have been used in his generation, he has gained momentum in the words of my dad's generation. My dad, who was in high gear, earned a lot of money and was a good communicator, so he started getting close to women who worked at night. My mom found out about this and served him with divorce papers. She's not the type to cry about it. She's pretty straightforward and decisive. Dad apologized and asked Mom to start over, but she quickly cut ties and said goodbye. I supported my mom's decision, but reality hit hard. Our financial situation turned grim with the sudden loss of Dad's income, especially since Dad had debts from his extramarital affair. We couldn't expect any child support from him, so we became a low-income family. I had to transfer from my private school to a public middle school in the district, starting in the second semester of 8th grade. Mom felt guilty, but I told her it wasn't her fault. Dad was to blame. I didn't have many fond memories of that private school anyway, so I didn't mind the change. Plus, I was glad to be rid of the annoying Kevin. I told my friends I was moving to a new school, but didn't even say goodbye to Kevin. After summer break, I transferred to a new school and never saw him again. My new public school had many of my old elementary school buddies, and I actually had a great time there, way better than at the private school. This flood of memories about my middle school years came back because I'm currently waiting for a job interview at a company. So, the company I'm interviewing for is the largest IT company in the country. My friends told me it'd be tough to get hired, but I passed the document screening and the first interview. The other day, I called the results from the second interview. I passed that too. Now, I'm here, all pumped up for the final interview. And at this place, I had an unexpected reunion. There were 5 of us called for the final interview. We were to be interviewed one by one. I was the last in line, number 5. Before the interviews started, while the 5 of us were waiting, an interviewer came in to check our names. When I saw his face, I was like, huh. It was Kevin, the senior I disliked back in middle school. He looked a bit rounder in the face, so I didn't recognize him immediately, but his way of talking was a dead giveaway. At first, Kevin didn't seem to recognize me, but when he got to my name, he did a double take.
David,
he said, clearly reacting differently to my name than he had with the other 4. This interviewer, who I believed to be Kevin, looked me right in the eye after calling my name. I felt like saying, "Hey, long time no see," and waving at him, but given the tense atmosphere of the interview setting, I held back. Before I could do anything more relaxed, Kevin quickly looked away and explained the interview process to all 5 of us, as if nothing had happened. Afterward, we were taken to the front of interview room and asked to sit on chairs outside to wait our turn. The first person was called in and the interview started. About 7 to 8 minutes later, the first candidate came out and the second was called in. I quietly asked the first guy how it went.
They didn't ask me much, just the usual stuff. Why I wanted the job, what I'd like to do if I got it.
He replied with a relieved look on his face.
So, pretty standard stuff.
The guy who was 4th in line for the interview said in a relieved tone, and the guy 3rd in line chuckled, and everyone relaxed a little. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th candidates were each done in about the same 7 to 8 minutes. Finally, it was my turn. David. I was called in. Excuse me. As I entered the room, two interviewers were sitting in front of me, and one of them was definitely Kevin.
Let's start the interview. First question. Please tell us your motivation for applying.
The other interviewee, who was not Kevin, asked me that question. Here it comes, just like the others said it would be. I gave my prepared answer. I'm motivated by my previous job in system development, but I wanted to tackle larger scale projects. My experience will allow me to contribute effectively to your team. As soon as I finished speaking, Kevin jumped in.
Many people say they want to do big things and join our company. But the reality is a lot of the work is detailed and mundane. Are you aware of this?
His tone was almost confrontational. The other interviewer glanced at Kevin, looking a bit flustered. But Kevin kept going.
You seem to have a naive view of our company. I'm giving you a special challenge, a test, 10 minutes long.
The other interviewer looked surprised.
Kevin, what are you doing? We didn't give tests to the other four.
Kevin replied,
It's okay. This guy is special. I never expected such a reunion. Right, David?
It was clear Kevin remembered me from middle school. Yes, it's been a long time. Kevin, I was wondering if I was allowed to talk about this during the interview, but Kevin seemed to have more authority than the other interviewee, and no one could control his unruly behavior. The other interviewer looked in confusion, but he gave up and listened to us in silence.
Man, I was surprised when I returned from summer break in my junior year, and you had just vanished. There was no goodbye or anything, and I thought that wasn't nice. Have you learned any manners since becoming an adult? I could reject you right now without even interviewing you. But it's not fun just to dismiss you outright. So I prepared for this test. I didn't know you were applying until I saw the list of candidates today. I had to scramble to get this test from the website at the last minute.
Kevin said this and pulled out some papers from his clear folder. It's not a test on a computer, it's a paper form test. Huh. Then he showed the interviewer next to him the test I was about to be given.
How about that, Chris? Check this out. Even you, a graduate of Harvard University, wouldn't be able to solve this, right?
Yes, it's a math problem. It's too difficult for me to solve.
Chris, the interviewer, as he flipped through the test.
See, David, even my coworker, a Harvard University graduate, is stumped by this challenging problem. And it took me, a University of New York graduate, an hour to solve it. So your chances of solving it in 10 minutes are zero less than zero.
Kevin laughed triumphantly. I was a bit surprised to learn that Kevin had graduated from the University of New York. He took advantage of my silence to further assert his dominance.
I heard from your classmates later on. You became PUA because your parents divorced when you were in middle school, and you couldn't afford private school anymore. So you just disappeared? PUA thing?
Kevin laughed again. I thought to myself how terrible it is to laugh at someone else's misfortune.
Well, you've always been a weird one. Regardless of your family situation, you're just incompetent and bottom of the barrel when it comes to education. Anyway, I'm going to give you this test now, and I can't wait to see you crushed and walking out of here. I never thought I'd get to enjoy our reunion like this. I should thank you. Well, someone at the bottom like you won't be able to solve it. But if by some miracle you do, I'll hire you with an annual salary of $10 million.
Kevin said, laughing as if he was having the time of his life. I had no response to that. The other interviewer, Chris, just sat there with a strained expression. I wondered if Kevin's behavior was even compliant with company policies. Definitely not. I regretted not recording this on a voice recorder, but who would have expected such disrespectful behavior in a job interview? This irregular situation was almost laughable in its absurdity.
All right, I'll hand out the test now.
Kevin announced, standing up with the test papers in hand. Chris hurriedly set up a folding table and then placed the test paper, printed with questions, in front of me.
You have 10 minutes. If you give up, you can leave before time's up. Of course, that means you're not hired.
Kevin said, glancing at the wall clock. As the second hand hit 0, he declared,
Start now.
I flipped over the test in front of me and started reading the questions. As I carefully went through each problem, Kevin taunted,
Hard, isn't it? I knew you couldn't do it. Just go home.
I ignored Kevin's remarks and began working on the problems. Kevin stopped trying to talk to me after a while, but after 5 minutes had passed, he said, Your hand has stopped. I commend your effort to try and solve at least one question. But you know, sometimes it's important to know when to give up. Ready to throw in the towel? I replied to him then, No, I'm not giving up. My response made Kevin raise his voice even more.
Stubborn, aren't you? It's not good to cling to false hope. It's better to cut your losses and move on to things you can actually do.
You're right, Kevin. Clinging to the impossible isn't like me at all. But you're making a big mistake. I haven't stopped because I've given up. I said this and put down my pen, laying it on the table.
A big mistake. How dare you say such insolent things? Well, you still have 3 minutes left. Stick it out if you want. It's your choice.
Kevin replied angrily. No need to stick it out, because I've already solved everything. Should I hand it over to you, Kevin? I said. Kevin became even more enraged.
You have an attitude. Oh, I see. You're just too proud to submit a blank sheet, so you scribbled something on it. But if it's all wrong, it's meaningless. You're not getting hired either way. Goodbye and take care.
Hold on a second, Kevin. Calm down. Just grade it properly. The answers are on the website, right? Kevin looked at me disgusted and said, That's a hassle. He opened his laptop, searched for the answer page, and compared it to the test paper I had handed him. After a while, Kevin's face turned pale. Is something wrong, Kevin? I asked. The other interviewer, Chris, leaned over to look at Kevin's laptop screen, and then at my test paper.
All the answers are correct.
Chris exclaimed, raising his voice for the first time. Kevin was speechless. Say something, Kevin. It's terrible to conduct a test and not grade it properly. When I said this, Kevin accused, You. Where did you get the answers? How did you cheat? I won't forgive this. Exasperated, I sighed deeply and said, All the answers are correct, aren't they? And I didn't cheat. How could I have cheated in this situation? Kevin, you printed out these questions on a whim. It would have been impossible for me, waiting in the lounge, to know about this in advance and find the answers. The other 4 candidates can vouch that I didn't leave the waiting area. Now, please graciously admit that all my answers are correct, Kevin. Hearing my words, Kevin, visibly trembling, retorted,
Don't joke with me. How can someone with such a low educational background solve these difficult questions? What exactly are you?
I answered his question. Kevin, actually, these difficult questions were created by me back in middle school. I said this with a straight face.
That's impossible. How could a middle schooler, especially you back then, create questions that even I, a University of New York graduate, struggled with? Are you lying?
It's not a lie. I remember telling you back then that I always got 100% in math. Don't you remember? I brought up our middle school days. Kevin always liked to boast about his grades and was annoyingly persistent in asking me about my test results every time. Whenever I honestly told him my grades, he would get angry and accuse me of lying, saying, "Do you realize what happens when you lie to me? Stop messing around." I always scored above 95 in all subjects, especially excelling in math with consistent perfect scores. But Kevin never believed me, so I just let it be.
Back in middle school, I always thought you were lying. I never thought of you as a studious person.
Kevin still seemed to think I was lying.
Kevin, did you actually see his resume thoroughly? The education section after high school is on another page, and I missed it too, but look at this.
Chris, the other interviewer, said this while looking at the computer screen, showing Kevin the education page from my application form. Kevin rolled his eyes as he looked at the screen.
What? Graduated from the University of New York, and then went to the Technical University of Munich, known as TUM, majoring in engineering.
Kevin read this out loud, to which Chris responded, TUM is known as one of the world's top engineering schools. It has produced several Nobel Prize winners. The level is just incomparable. Amazing. Kevin was speechless, taken aback. No, I didn't receive a Nobel Prize, so it's not incredible. I've always been interested in programming since I was little, learning it independently and excelling in STEM subjects. In middle school, I developed apps as a hobby and studied IT. The test you gave me today was something I created back when I transferred from private to public school in 8th grade. At the time, we were poor and I couldn't use a computer. So I made and posted college-level math problems online to pass the time. I was surprised that you found the one I created and used it in the test. I explained this to both of them.
I see. You graduated from the University of New York and then TUM, which is why your post-university education is on a separate page. I apologize for overlooking it. It's an honor to have someone as talented as you work with us. But then again, are you sure our company is right for you? With your qualifications, it would be easy for you to join a renowned IT company in Germany, or even start your own business, right?
Chris said, looking me in the eye. Kevin remained silent throughout. Yes, as you said, I considered working for a German IT company and even starting my own business. However, I wanted to contribute to my home country, America. So I wanted to work for your company. I believe there are endless possibilities here with a global perspective. When I responded this way, Chris's eyes lit up.
Yes, our company is still growing, so we'd really appreciate your help. Right, Kevin?
Chris sought Kevin's agreement. However, Kevin, unable to accept the situation and his pride wounded, then he mutters to himself, "How could I lose to David?"
Kevin, you're not losing. You're a University of New York graduate, after all.
Chris tried to console him, but Kevin lamented, "I was always jealous of David in middle school. He was respected by everyone, teachers and students alike, and was capable of everything. I was relieved when he transferred out. I worked hard, graduated from the University of New York, and climbed up to this position at a renowned IT company, and now he's threatening my status again. Give me a break." Then the door to the interview room opened with a click. Turning around, I saw a man standing there.
President Smith.
It was the CEO, Smith.
I came to check on the final interview, which took quite some time, and I overheard some of the conversation at the entrance. I made a mistake in leaving the interview to Kevin. You've let your personal feelings interfere far too much. Chris must have been in a tough spot, not being able to speak up against his senior. But now that I'm here, I can say this clearly as the president. First, David.
The president then called my name. Yes. When I responded, the president said, "Actually, I was interested in you since seeing your application. Chris mentioned earlier, and I agree, that you could earn a much higher salary at a top German company or even start your own business with your talent. But you still want to work for our company." The president asked me this question. "Thank you, President. Yes, I did think a lot about where to work. But I chose to work for your company. As I told Chris earlier, I want to help develop an American company with a global vision." I replied, and the president nodded in agreement, saying, "Thank you." Then he continued speaking.
And now, Kevin.
Kevin was called. He said, "Yes," in a small voice, and looked at the president. He looked like a puppy, staring anxiously at his owner, expecting his owner to be angry with him.
I'm shocked at your brazen behavior. You've shamelessly brought your personal vendetta into my company's recruitment process. You're fired.
The president declared firmly.
Please, President. Anything but that. I'm truly sorry. Please forgive me.
Kevin begged with tearful eyes, but the president was unyielding.
Kevin, work is all about trust. Actually, it's not just work. All relationships are based on trust. I trusted you with the interview process, and you betrayed that trust by acting on your own whims. A talented candidate like David comes for an interview, and you try to disqualify him with terrible treatment. If we let that happen, it would be a significant loss for the company. Losing you would be better than losing David, Kevin. In fact, we don't need someone like you at all, who loses trust regardless of being a University of New York graduate.
Kevin just looked down silently. Chris appeared somewhat relieved. The president continued talking.
Well, I did trust you with the interview, but fairness is crucial, so we installed a voice recorder in the interview room without your knowledge.
The president placed the recorder on the table and played the recording. I inwardly cheered the president for having a voice recorder. The recorder started playing the conversation I had been given before the test, and Kevin's voice, full of intimidation, was unmistakable.
No matter your family background, you're just incompetent with a bottom-tier education. Did you even graduate high school? Just barely a high school graduate, right? Anyway, I'll give you this test now and enjoy seeing you crushed and leaving. I never thought I'd enjoy such a reunion. Thank you. This test is probably unsolvable for someone at the bottom. If you somehow solve it, I'll hire you for an annual $10 million salary.
The president stopped the recording there.
So, Kevin, what an outrageous thing you said. You thought David was the bottom of the barrel, but he's actually a highly educated and capable individual who solved all the difficult questions. Who's going to pay the promised $10 million? Should I, the president, pay it? If you decide such things on your own, we might have to consider legal action. It's a serious offense, Kevin.
The president spoke to Kevin sternly.
I'm sorry, President. It was just a slip of the tongue. I didn't mean it.
Kevin tried to excuse himself. You conducted an unnecessary recruitment test with a candidate just based on your words. You'll have to take responsibility for your actions. We'll cut your salary and bonus this month and allocate it as part of David's $10 million reward. Of course, it won't be enough, so you'll have to make monthly payments to cover the rest. The president said even more sternly.
That's...
Kevin looked utterly despairing and couldn't say anything more. The president continued without hesitation.
You're also responsible for your words and a crime of insulting David. If you're sued for defamation, you'll lose. I'll keep this recording with me.
I couldn't help but admire President Smith for taking down the obnoxious Kevin so thoroughly. I felt incredibly relieved and pledged in my heart to follow President Smith and contribute to his company. 3 months have passed since then. I was hired by Smith's company, a leading IT firm named G-Tech, and worked in a significant position. Since joining, G-Tech has embarked on more global business strategies, and I've contributed using my German skills and the technology knowledge I gained from the Foreign Engineering University. Kevin had to leave G-Tech and now works as a systems engineer in a smaller company. I happened to bump into a middle school classmate the other day, and we talked for a bit in a cafe. His name was Brian, and he was in the same group with me in middle school at the time, so he and Kevin had been hanging out together.
You're working at G-Tech, right? Kevin used to work there too. He became famous among us for getting into the University of New York and joining a renowned IT company. But I heard he wasn't well liked due to his attitude.
I told Brian the name of the company I worked for, and he told me about it.
But you know, Kevin was really down after you suddenly transferred. He kept saying, "Why did he have to leave?" and looked dejected.
No, Kevin said he felt refreshed when I left.
He should have been more friendly with you. He always acted tough and wasn't honest. Deep down, he wanted to be friends with you.
Brian said, if that was true, it was quite clumsy of Kevin, but I felt a bit relieved to hear it. This is something I heard recently. The president told me that Kevin had offered to pay me several $100s every month after he left G-Tech to help cover the $10 million he owed me. But I refused to accept it because I was being paid enough at my company, as I didn't want to take money from someone struggling. I'd rather focus on developing the company and improving both its performance and my salary.
The president said Kevin seems to have changed a bit since working at another company. He's reflecting and working diligently. Kevin's a capable guy when he's not overconfident. If he continues to work hard, I'd be willing to work with him again.
The president remarked. I felt the same. One day, Kevin and I, such as the oil and water relationship, could become something more meaningful, like a well-mixed dressing, even if we don't thoroughly blend. With these farts, a few months later, Chris and I were assigned to conduct mid-career interviews. On the day of the interviews,
The fifth candidate is seeking re-employment.
Chris noted, looking at the application form. Indeed. Kevin, University of New York graduate. What should we do? We both knew our thoughts were aligned. If Kevin had truly repented and was willing to cooperate and work with everyone, we'd want to work with him again.
Excuse me.
A man said as he entered the interview room. Seeing Kevin's softened expression, Chris and I exchanged knowing glances and started the interview.
You said your name was Smith, right? Looking at your resume, it seems your college life was all about club activities. Haven't you learned the basics of program development properly? Talk about your graduation project. Your voice is too soft. I don't feel any enthusiasm. Never mind, I don't see a need for you in our company.
The director of HR, Benjamin, shouted at the applicant, Oliver. The frightened Oliver's voice became quieter. The atmosphere in the interview room was ice cold. Just when everyone thought he might run out of the room, Oliver looked up and, with a firm gaze, said to Benjamin, "You don't see a need for me in this company. I was thinking the same thing." He slowly took off his glasses. Yes, I was the company's CEO, but was undercover as a job applicant for internal inspection. At that moment, the color drained from the director's face. What happened next was completely unexpected. My name is Oliver Brown. During college, I started what you might call a tech startup. Thanks to some talented staff, the company grew steadily. Initially, I handled everything from management, HR to development. But now the company has grown to a size where we've divided into management, HR, and development departments. I mainly handle the management and a part of the development department. I've left HR responsibilities to the employees. Lately, I've been worried about my youthful face. For the past 2 years, I've been in France for a major joint venture with an overseas company, and my work in the US was done remotely. Even in the US, where folks sometimes mistake me for a college student, in France, I've been mistaken for a high schooler, which was quite a blow to my ego. Being the CEO and mistaken for an intern at the reception was tough. In business scenarios, looking young can be a disadvantage as people tend to underestimate you. So, I tried to gain some weight and wear stylish glasses, but it didn't change the situation. Well, after wrapping up the joint development project during my 2-year stay in France, I recently came back to the US. Once I got back, there was an issue I had to work on immediately. It was to review our hiring method. Recently, our company's performance has been struggling a bit. From what I've seen with the development team working remotely, everyone is putting in their best effort, and the development of new products isn't falling too far behind either. However, the retention rate of our young employees has been rapidly dropping. Several of them, fresh out of college, quit within their first year. I believe this might be a reason for our recent stagnation. If an employee leaves after more than 2 years, it might be due to personal reasons or a change in their perspective. However, quitting within the first year might indicate that these applicants should have never joined our company in the first place. This is concerning. Upon joining the company, both our side and the applicant's side have made considerable preparations. After joining, our company invests a significant amount of time, manpower, and money in training. Even the new employees are working hard to learn the ropes of unfamiliar tasks. Some of them have even relocated or started living alone to change their living environment for the sake of joining our company. If they resign within a few months, it's a huge loss for both the company and the departing new employee. Furthermore, when resignations keep occurring, it leads to a feeling of helplessness among the staff who trained them. In the long run, it can also affect the company's morale, which is quite problematic. Besides, we don't have unlimited positions. If we've hired someone who wasn't supposed to join our company in the first place, it means we've missed out on hiring someone else who could have been a great asset. That's a real waste. For emerging IT startups like us, we're absolutely desperate for new employees who will be key players in the future. We need to address this mismatch somehow. Currently, the main person in charge of hiring is an employee named Benjamin, who joined our company mid-career. He was promoted from the development department to the administrative department last year. When he joined the company midway, I was already in France, so I've never met him face to face. On top of that, not only in France, but also in the US, people often mistake me for a college student because of my baby face. Maybe it would be a good idea to use this young look and the fact that I haven't met Benjamin to go undercover during the hiring process and see how it works firsthand. A playful idea like that crossed my mind. I couldn't help but smirk, feeling as if I had switched to being a detective, almost forgetting the actual purpose of improving our business performance. On the first day of the undercover investigation, I decided to attend the company orientation. All 3 members of the HR department were involved in the orientation. First off, there was the receptionist, Kathy Johnson. When I introduced myself under the false name Oliver instead of Smith, she treated me in a very friendly manner. She also briefly explained about the company and the upcoming hiring tests to the other attendees, all with a smile. Her gentle demeanor made everything easy to understand. I felt so grateful to have her representing our company at this orientation. Then, inside the venue, Bob Anderson was projecting a PowerPoint presentation on the screen. He's a young and earnest-looking guy with very focused eyes. Since I entered just in time for the start, the orientation led by Bob began shortly after I sat down. The presentation gave an overview of the company and shared our philosophy. Bob honestly discussed both our strengths and the areas we want to improve on. I felt that anyone who understood this would be more likely to stay with the company after joining. Moreover, the PowerPoint, as well as the handouts given, were meticulously made and easy to read. Catherine, who had come back from the reception, was attentive to the attendees, picking up questions and assisting those who might not have caught on to everything. Given the nature of our IT development business, we have many employees who are good at programming but not so good at interpersonal communication, or who might take a bit longer to grasp certain topics. but with the right environment, such employees can work without any issues and be invaluable assets. In fact, it's often said, you can't have it both ways, and while some might struggle with communication, they excel in development and show unparalleled talent, which we're grateful for. We certainly believe in continuing to hire such uniquely talented individuals. That's why I truly appreciated the support Catherine provided. I felt confident that applicants who are truly good at programming would aspire to join our company without hesitation. The orientation ended with closing speech from the director of HR department, Benjamin. Benjamin's remarks were appropriate for his position as the director of the department, with no issues to point out. The first day of my undercover investigation ended with satisfaction, thinking, our employees are truly exceptional. But just being satisfied doesn't make it an investigation. In fact, since I didn't spot any issues, the first day might be considered a failure in terms of undercover work. I'll have to be more attentive on the second day of my undercover investigation. On the second day of my undercover investigation, it's finally time for the job interview. Our company's hiring interviews are usually conducted by Benjamin from the HR department. Excuse me, I'm Smith. I say, a tad nervous, as I knock on the interview room door. If Benjamin recognizes my true identity, this whole ruse will be pointless. Thus, I used the pseudonym Smith, the same one I'd used during the company orientation, and entered the room with my head slightly bowed. Suddenly,
What's with the head bowing?
that was the first thing Benjamin said. I was taken aback. In our company, we aim for employees with specialized skills to freely showcase their abilities. As a general rule, reprimanding subordinates by those in higher positions is prohibited. Initially, we had concerns that without the ability to reprimand, the organization might not function properly. However, as we continued, we realized those concerns were unnecessary. When there's a situation that requires correction, instead of raising our voices, the first step is to discuss the current issue to ensure everyone's on the same page. Then, management conveys the desired state of affairs. From there, it's simply a matter of brainstorming together on how to improve and achieve that state. It's pretty straightforward. When addressing an issue, we encourage our employees to speak honestly about why they took a certain action. Of course, we don't respond with things like "that's a ridiculous reason." By getting them to open up, we gain a deeper understanding of their feelings, leading to more fundamental solutions and taking a step towards improving the company as a whole. In our company, we have a diverse group working together, people from different backgrounds, personalities, ages, and genders. In such an environment, there are often situations where not just the subordinates' methods, but sometimes even the superiors' methods need to be changed. It's inevitable. While there are still plenty of companies in the US that resort to the old-school, tough love approach of yelling for discipline, at least in our firm, we genuinely wish that our employees can sidestep any unnecessary conflicts. We hope they can focus on their tasks without the constant fear of getting chewed out. Excuse me, I never expected to be yelled at in a company with such a philosophy. Generally, walking into an interview room with a downcast look isn't considered commendable. But in our company, If you're a developer, it's perfectly acceptable. First and foremost, as long as an engineer can handle programming and requirements definition properly, there's no problem at all. If among them, someone is exceptionally good at communication, eventually they'll be praised and might lead teams or handle negotiations, but we don't expect that from a new graduate developer. Above all, making an applicant shrink back prevents us from hearing their real thoughts. Naturally, we prohibit stress interviews in our company. Struggling to respond to unexpected questions, Benjamin continued to use strong words.
You said your name was Smith, right? I looked at your resume, and it seems you spent all your college life in extracurricular activities. Haven't you properly grasped the basics of software development? Now, explain your graduation research.
Yes, well, for my graduation research, I created a database on teas. It's something very familiar in our lives. I chose the theme of tea because it's easy to set standards for comparison, and a lot of data can be gathered. I answered truthfully about what I researched during my senior year of college. After all, it was a topic researched by the founder of this company. I believed there shouldn't be any problem for my recruitment.
Speak up. Our company mainly develops industrial software. Your research on tea is far from our core business. Just how high on your priority list is our company? If we were your top choice, you wouldn't have done a thesis on a tea database.
Benjamin's yelling made me almost inadvertently reveal my true identity, even though the interview had barely started. I'm here on an undercover investigation today. I'm getting agitated, but I must let Benjamin do his usual thing and verify the hiring practices. As stated in my application form, your company is my top choice. Indeed, tea might be softer or a different field compared to your main development area. But in terms of learning database creation techniques, I believe it's appropriate.
You're too quiet. I can't feel your motivation. And even if you wanted to learn the techniques, you should have chosen research closer to the job profile of your desired company. That's it. I don't see the need for you in our company.
Benjamin, not only criticizing my demeanor, but also my research content, ranted aggressively. If this is how the interviews go, our company will end up hiring only those who can handle pressure and excel at communication. It's not that being able to handle pressure is a bad thing, but aren't we missing out on truly assessing vital programming skills and originality in thought? It seems Johnson has said all he wanted to, and he's signaling me to leave with his eyes. Perhaps it's time I reveal who I am. You don't see the need for me in this company. I was thinking the same. Raising my head, I fixed my gaze on Benjamin.
What are you talking about?
Benjamin looked startled for a moment, as if he'd been caught red-handed. But when I took off my glasses and met his eyes again, his face quickly turned pale.
Oliver, why are you here? Weren't you in France?
You finally recognized me, Benjamin. I just returned from France. To get to the point, our company's retention rate for new hires has been terribly low. I believe there was a mismatch in our hiring process, so I went undercover using a fake name. I did not raise my voice at Benjamin, who had been conducting job interviews that were completely against our company's policy. At our company, it's not about superiors scolding subordinates. It's about aligning our understanding and guiding them in the right direction.
Oliver.
Benjamin, You seemed to be aware that he was conducting interviews against company policy, looked at my face again, and nearly fell off his chair. From your reaction, it seems you know that the way you've been conducting interviews isn't in line with our company culture. If you're aware of it, it makes this conversation easier. For the subsequent interviews, don't raise your voice or conduct them as if they're stress interviews. Listen carefully to what each candidate has done, what they want to do in our company, and their current skills.
Oliver, I thought I would be fired for doing this to you.
Benjamin looked like he was on the verge of tears. The problem isn't what you did to me. The problem is that you've been giving stress interviews to potential valuable candidates. We'll decide on your treatment later, but first, please conduct the remaining interviews properly. Having identified the cause of the hiring mismatch, I decided to end my undercover investigation. However, Benjamin, an elite employee nominated by the former HR manager, had been performing well in the development department. I wonder what made him act this way. From internal investigations, it seemed Benjamin had become overbearing since becoming HR manager. In his previous role in development, he was known to be quiet and passionate. Perhaps the unfamiliarity of HR work and the pressure to act as a manager led him astray. It seems there was a mismatch not just in hiring, but also in internal transfers. When I called Benjamin to the CEO's office to discuss the future, he started talking on his own.
I'm truly sorry for causing inconvenience. I was always focused solely on development. I'm not good at socializing, or rather, I don't really know how to interact as a manager. I'm really not suited for the position of the director of HR. When it came to hiring interviews, my eagerness to hire someone who could really handle development overshadowed everything else, leading to the harshness. The recent high turnover rate also made me anxious, and when I thought I shouldn't be taken lightly, I ended up being too strict during interviews. I don't expect you to accept these excuses, but I really love this company, and I love development. My sincere desire is to improve the company, so could you please transfer me back to the development department?
Benjamin said this and apologized sincerely. His body was tensed up, shaking in various places. So that's what it was all about. Benjamin, you can lift your head. I've talked to many people and realized that the development department is where you truly belong. The position in HR was a mismatch. I apologize for placing you in a role that didn't suit you. Your transfer to the development department will be as an entry-level employee due to this incident. Is that okay?
Thank you. Yes, I have no issues with that.
Benjamin accepted the condition without any hesitation. This time, unlike before, he seemed relieved and at ease. The loss during the year Benjamin served as the director of the HR department was significant, but it could be said that it was my own fault since I was in France and didn't properly oversee the company. Maybe our company isn't really in a position where, just because we have big deals abroad, I should be out and about handling them. Given our company's current maturity level, we might not yet be in a position to delegate everything to those below. It's possible that I, as the CEO, always need to be in the US to keep an eye on things. It reminded me once again of the challenges of running a business. By the way, what I gained from this undercover investigation wasn't just identifying Benjamin's issues. I had exchanged contact information with other applicants in the waiting room before the interview. A few days after the interviews, I decided to go out for drinks with them. Now, there's no need to hide my true identity. As soon as I entered the bar, I revealed that I was actually the CEO. The applicants were all delighted and, with the help of some alcohol, they shared their dreams that they couldn't discuss during the intense interview with Benjamin. Watching them passionately talk about the developments they wanted to work on, I felt hopeful for America's future. Among those who had gathered was an applicant named Jacob. He pitched a unique product idea, different from the others who had applied to our company. Jacob said he's certainly interested in our current projects, but in the long run, he wants to develop products more closely tied to local businesses. First on his list was developing a subscription system for tea leaves in collaboration with a local tea shop. He wanted to deliver high-quality tea from small, yet well-regarded local shops to the entire country. Our company isn't exactly focused on local collaborations right now, but I believe that eventually, we'll see a shift back from excessive globalization to more local engagement. Jacob's proposal seemed perfect for our company. On a side note, a database I created back in college might finally get some attention. When I got back to the office, I learned that Jacob had been so pressured during his interview with Benjamin that he couldn't speak at all, resulting in his rejection. We almost lost a valuable candidate. I shared the story from the drinking party with Benjamin and everyone in the HR department and decided to hire him. Furthermore, after bringing Benjamin back to development, we promoted Catherine Miller to the position of HR manager. Catherine has always been an outstanding employee, even showcasing her attentiveness during company presentations. At first, Catherine was taken aback by her promotion, but she quickly smiled confidently and said, "Leave it to me." With her promotion to HR manager, Catherine outdid herself and made even bigger contributions. Our company culture is about aligning perspectives rather than reprimanding employees, and this became a hot topic. Catherine gained attention as a young female HR manager in a tech startup and was featured in our local town magazine. Her feature in the town magazine created a buzz, leading to interviews with bigger magazines, and soon she was in the spotlight nationally. Time flew by since the undercover recruitment operation, and a new fiscal year has begun. Both Benjamin, who returned to the development department, and Catherine, who took over as HR manager, have been excelling in their fields. Within a week of his transfer back to development, Benjamin revisited a stalled project and steered it towards a resolution. And as mentioned earlier, Catherine is constantly in demand for magazine interviews. She's also been putting great efforts into public relations, an area our company hadn't focused on much. One thing I often reflect on is the idea that everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. At first glance, someone might seem problematic, but on closer inspection, they often have reasons for their actions or might be struggling because they're not in the right role. Rarely do people intentionally set out to do harm from the start. If given the right environment and tasks suited to their strengths, anyone can shine. As the CEO, my responsibility is to create an environment where all employees can excel. Doing so will surely brighten the future of the company. Now, What issue should I tackle this year? Maybe focus on hiring recent graduates to bolster our young workforce. While I was in France, I hired several employees. Maybe I should set aside some time to chat with them individually. Or perhaps sending some of our budding talents on exchange programs with our partners could be beneficial to create a better working environment and further improve our performance. I'm always excitedly strategizing for the next step. It's finally the final interview. However, the interviewer in charge tore up my resume right in front of me, saying, "Who would hire such a bottom-tier ex-janitor?"
If there's someone willing to hire a bottom tire like you, please let me know. I'll call them here.
But this interviewer still doesn't know. Understood. I'll call them then.
What?
Mom, can you come to the interview venue? The interviewer is calling. My parents, who they are. My name is Max Johnson. I'm a 24-year-old part-time worker who works as a janitor during the day while attending night classes at college. I'm not exactly poor, but when I was 20, my parents divorced, saying they wanted to pursue their passions without being tied down by a family. Since then, it's been just me and my dad. Even though my dad has had many business trips, even now he travels around the world. Thanks to their amicable divorce, my parents are still on good terms, and I know they will stay in touch. I also have a good relationship with my mother, even though we don't live together. The reason I've been working as a part-time worker without a regular job until this age is that I had a strong desire to travel not only in this country, but all around the world. My father has been working a job that involves traveling abroad since a long time ago, which naturally sparked my interest in foreign countries from a young age. There are still so many things I don't know about the world. It's something I can never truly understand just by watching TV, reading magazines, or browsing the internet. I want to go there in person. I want to see it with my own eyes and feel it with my own skin. With that in mind, during my high school years, I used my long vacations to visit my father's location and explore various tourist attractions, and even some off-the-beaten-path places. During that time, I got hooked on traveling abroad, and right after high school, I accompanied my father on his overseas business trips. I also started remote work during that time. When I returned to my country, I took up a job as a janitor while traveling within the country during my days off. It's gotten to the point where it's harder to find places I haven't been to than places I have. I'm grateful to my parents for giving me experiences that I couldn't have had anywhere else. And I'm still working as a part-time worker to this day. One day, when I told my mother, "I think there's no place where I've never been in this country anymore," she suggested, "Well, maybe it's time to try being a full-time worker." It's true that I've traveled all around the world, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say I've conquered the US as well. Most people of my generation have regular jobs and are working, and I've also been thinking about becoming an office worker eventually. So it seemed like good timing. However, with no real work experience and not even being able to fill out a proper resume, I wondered if there was any company that would hire me. While I was thinking about this, my mother introduced me to a certain trading company. and I ended up having an interview. They had already hired me as a remote worker, so the interview was more of a formality for converting me into a regular worker. Although I had been working as a part-time worker, it was my first time setting foot in this company, and I was a bit nervous. It was an interview for a well-respected major corporation that everyone admires, so even if it was just a formality, I felt a sense of tension. I've been introduced by my mom, so I shouldn't get too complacent. I quietly motivated myself as I walked into the venue. When I was called in and entered the room, there were 3 interviewers sitting across a long table. There was an elderly man, a middle-aged woman, and a petite woman.
Please have a seat.
Thank you. I took a seat on a pipe chair, and the 3 of them introduced themselves in order as Brown, Garcia, and Miller. After shaking hands and saying, "Nice to meet you," we began with the formal self-introductions. When it was over, the atmosphere changed drastically.
Well, your highest level of education is high school, and you're now working as a part-time worker.
Yeah, that's right. Mr. Johnson, didn't you go to college?
After graduating from high school, I went to live with my father overseas, so I didn't pursue further education and instead got part-time jobs.
I see. It says part-time work here too. Was it all remote work, then?
Yes, that's correct. I didn't work outside. I received work orders from your company and completed them from home.
I see.
It was tense, and Brown and Garcia exchanged glances, forcing smiles and sighing.
What kind of work did you do remotely?
Yes, I mainly did translation work for data written in foreign languages.
Translation. Huh? Well, your father actually works overseas, and they say translation apps have improved quite a bit now.
What?
Oh, never mind. I was talking about something else.
What did she just say? Don't mean to brag, but I've received high praise for my performance as a part-time worker, and I've been entrusted with one job after another. But they think I use a translation app. Do they think my father does the translation for me? Am I being misunderstood?
3 years of remote part-time work overseas, and 3 years since returning to this country. It's been all remote work, right? Have you ever worked in the office?
No, I haven't. I originally worked remotely, so there was no need to come to the office.
So, is it that a shut-in has finally decided to enter society?
For a moment, I didn't understand what they were saying.
Well, that's right. I mean, 6 years of remote part-time work is not much different from being a shut-in.
That's right, and that part-time job seems quite suspicious. Translation work can now be done by machines to some extent. Maybe you only worked a few hours a week.
Brown and Garcia ridiculed me, making fun of me together.
Besides, he also has a job as a janitor in this country. That's quite a low-level job, isn't it?
Indeed. It's the perfect job for a shut-in. A decent person wouldn't do such work.
They pointed at my resume, laughed, looked at my face, and smirked at each other. Well, it's true that I've only done remote work other than being a janitor, but I have extensive experience living abroad, and I'm confident in my language skills. I handle all the translation work myself.
Speaking of experience living abroad, you're just a shut-in. Even if you're confident in your language skills, well, There are students around who have studied abroad and speak fluently. That alone isn't enough.
Their condescending attitude was getting to me, and my head was starting to hurt. The other petite woman, Miller, seemed to be focused on taking notes and didn't stop them or react in any way. What's going on? Wasn't this supposed to be a formality one? I was desperately trying to endure my anger.
Someone please tell me if they'd hire someone like this. Acting all high and mighty just because your parent had a little overseas assignment. Well, I'd love to see your parents.
You're absolutely right. Do you even know the competition ratio for our company's entrance exam? There's no way they'd reserve a spot for a bottom-tier candidate like you.
Brown said this as he playfully shook my resume, and Garcia agreed, tearing it up with enthusiasm. As I witnessed this, something inside me snapped. You want to see my parents?
Yeah, I bet you're curious. I mean, how can you even submit such a blank resume? No qualifications, no educational background. Do you take pride in your language skills? Well, that's up for debate too. I'd really like to know what kind of education you've had.
Well,
It's clear that having a single parent is a disadvantage. No matter how much overseas experience you have, you're still nothing more than a bottom feeder.
unable to endure their conversation any longer, I said, "Excuse me, may I say something?"
What can I help you with? Are you leaving?
No way. We haven't finished the interview yet.
Facing the two mocking individuals once again, I took a deep breath before speaking. You mentioned wanting to see my parents. Well, my mother actually works at this company. Can I call her here now?
Well, technically, it should be the father, right? But either is fine. If it allows us to see their face, we grant permission. Please, go ahead.
Thank you. I took out my smartphone from my bag and called my mother. Meanwhile, Brown and Garcia continued to smirk, making me feel disgusting. My mother picked up after 2 rings, and I put the call on speaker. Mom, sorry for bothering you, but could you come to the meeting room where I'm having an interview?
Is something wrong? I'll be right there. Just wait a moment.
As soon as they heard my mother's voice, Brown and Garcia frowned.
Wait, did you just hear that voice?
No way, right?
Ignoring the bewildered pair, Miller calmly got up and began preparing tea. And a few minutes later, as the meeting room door opened and a woman appeared, Brown and Garcia hastily stood up with surprised face.
President.
Excuse me for asking, but what are you doing here?
Hey, good job, everyone. How did the interview go?
It went smoothly.
I see. Miller, please report.
Yes.
Miller, who hadn't uttered a word until now, provided a brief report on the interview.
I see. So that's why I was called in.
What?
Max, I'm sorry for being late.
No, it's fine. As the two of us engaged in conversation, Brown and Garcia, who were comparing us, seemed to grow paler and paler.
Nice to meet you. I'm the mother of the bottom tire guy, Ava Taylor, who you two were just talking about.
Smiling at the two, my mother, in fact, is the president of this company.
You wanted to see my face, didn't you? But you two already saw it in yesterday's web conference, didn't you? Is it not enough yet?
What?
No way.
Facing the two who were gaping like fish out of water, my mother delivered the final blow.
I encouraged him to take up remote work so he could freely travel overseas because I was delighted that he developed an interest in the world.
After graduating from high school, when my mother found out that I was going to follow my father, she was delighted. She immediately arranged remote work for me, saying, "With remote work, you can do your job from anywhere in the world, so you can enjoy traveling to your heart's content. Go explore the world and broaden your horizons as much as you want." The reason I returned to this country was that my father asked me to support my mother since he was staying in China. The reason I took up the job of a janitor was that I was surprised and became interested in the cleanliness of Japanese offices when I traveled, and which was different from overseas. I wanted to know how they managed to keep the offices so clean, and it also offered relatively flexible hours, which worked out well for me.
Also, it seems like you doubt my son's language abilities, but his father is Chinese. My son is trilingual, proficient in English, Chinese, and Japanese.
Trilingual?
My son does most of the translation work for our company's reports coming from overseas branches. The report from the Chinese branch that you saw during yesterday's meeting, it was translated by my son. Are you suggesting that he used a translation app for that? Are you mocking my decision to recommend him?
Yo, we didn't mean to.
Under my mother's intimidating presence, the two of them had completely lost their words. When my mother's anger subsided a bit, Brown and Garcia, for some reason, started directing their anger towards Miller.
Did you know?
What are you talking about?
Don't play dumb. You knew this guy is the president's son, didn't you?
It's hard to believe you, the president's secretary, didn't know about the boss's son.
Yes, of course, I knew him. However, I was instructed not to interfere with the president's affairs.
What did you say?
Such a conversation only further fueled my mother's anger.
At first, my intention was to make it just a formality and let you conduct a superficial interview.
Then why?
But then I noticed something strange when you two conducted the interviews. The number of candidates being hired was extremely low. When I had Miller bring the resumes from that time, I found several highly talented individuals who had been rejected. It seemed very suspicious.
Well, it's because.
That's why I'm sorry, but I had Miller join as the recorder, partly for monitoring purposes. Miller also has a voice recorder hidden on her, so I'm looking forward to listening to it later.
President, that was a rather harsh situation, so please be careful when you listen to it.
Thank you.
Wait.
President, this is...
What? Is there any problem?
Seeing the pale faces of the two when she received the voice recorder from Miller, my mother smiled.
In any case, I'll take this matter seriously. We'll discuss your punishment later. Be prepared for it. Miller, may I ask you to see off my son?
Of course.
Max, I'm sorry for not informing you and using you like this.
Well, if that's the case, you can't help it. Thanks for coming.
Oh, you don't need to thank me.
I watched my mother leave with a kind smile, and then, guided by Miller, I headed to the office entrance. When I left the room, the last image I saw of Brown and Garcia was them kneeling there, in a state of shock. 1 month later, I went through another interview, which was also a formality one, and I passed successfully. I started my life as a company employee for the first time. My mother was amazed, but I wanted to understand the company from the inside, so I chose to start as a janitor. Balancing work and evening classes was challenging, but I found it enjoyable with plenty of new things to learn. When I asked my mother why she had encouraged me to become a regular employee, she said with a childlike, innocent smile, "I've always wanted you to be my successor. I thought that if I didn't act now, you might set off somewhere again soon 'cause you love traveling. I felt it was now or never." After that interview, Brown and Garcia were both dismissed from their positions due to disciplinary action. It turned out that the two of them had conspired together to reject overly talented candidates, those with single parents or undesirable educational backgrounds, and students who posed a threat to their positions in the company. They used abusive language during interviews and even engaged in coercive interviews, which is quite rare nowadays. Furthermore, as investigations continued, it was revealed that the two of them were involved in an extramarital affair, and they had also embezzled a small amount of money. Video evidence from surveillance cameras confirmed their actions, leaving them with no room for denial. My mother expressed her regret, saying, "As the president, it's shameful that I didn't notice this wrongdoings earlier. From now on, I'll pay closer attention to each and every employee." A year has passed since I became a regular employee. By this time, my business trips under the guise of inspections had increased. My company had branches throughout the US and overseas, which allowed me to travel the world once again. The perspective of the world during business trips was entirely different from that of leisure travel, and I found it exciting and fascinating. I never expected that I would continue traveling the world even after starting my career, so I am truly grateful to my mother. My father even said, "If you ever come to China, let's have a meal together," and I'm looking forward to that as well. While conducting inspections in parallel, I continued my translation work as before. Additionally, I started providing monthly language training sessions within the company, and I was entrusted with the role of the instructor. Occasionally, I still took on cleaning duties, and since graduating from night school, I had seriously begun studying business management. This made my days even busier and more hectic, but I found them fulfilling and satisfying. Several years later, I was promoted to vice president of the company. I had risen to the level of my mother as equals. Of course, I was still far from being a seasoned business leader, and I felt that catching up with my mother was an impossible task. However, my mother smiled at the people involved and said, "Starting next year, I plan to entrust the position of president to my son." I found myself filled with trepidation every day. "Mom, becoming the president is impossible for me. I still have a lot to learn, and I don't have the trust of the employees. It's too much of a burden." I burst into the president's office, and my mother responded, feigning innocence, "Oh, is that so?"
I think it's really good thing. You gain experience of everything when you're young. Trust from the employees isn't something that increases in a day. You earn it little by little. But now isn't the time for that. You'll build it up through your work as the president.
But
Everyone feels uncertain at first. I did too. But a company isn't something you run alone. When you become president, there will be times when you're unsure for a while. In those times, consult with those around you. Rely on them. Even if the results seem wrong, believe in yourself and the people around you. If you do that, you'll naturally become a good president without even realizing it.
Mom,
I'm looking forward to seeing a splendid president in you, Max.
inspired by my mother's words, I reflected on my tumultuous life so far and managed to motivate myself. When I thought about becoming the president, I realized how narrow my perspective had been due to the pressure. All right, I'll do my best in my own way.
Yes, I'm rooting for you.
It seems that from the next season, Miller will become my exclusive secretary, which is reassuring. I'll support you with all my might, so please don't worry, Miller said, and I felt a bit relieved, although I kept it a secret from my mother. After passing on the role of president to me, my mother plans to go to China. It seems my father has bought an apartment in Shanghai, and he invited her to live there together. My mother, perhaps out of embarrassment, said, I thought, why not go along with it? But when I saw her happy expression, I couldn't help but nod eagerly. After retiring as president, my mother will take on the title of chairman, but she said, I want to see the world and experience it like my son does. I plan to engrave in my memory the world that both of you found so captivating. So even if some troubles happened, please don't call me back too often, and she laughed. It seems she envied me, as she watched me traveling around the world, reporting happily with souvenirs and photos, and wished to embark on a world tour herself someday. Looking forward to my mother's stories from her travels, I decided to send her off.
President, about tomorrow's schedule.
Yeah, sure.
Also, could you please review these documents?
Understood. Since becoming the president, I have been working tirelessly every day. However, recently, I have been feeling a certain change within myself.
President, is something bothering you?
Oh, no. It's nothing. Just get back to work.
Understood.
As Miller returned to the secretary's office, I sighed. For quite some time now, my gaze had been involuntarily following Miller. Initially, she had been a reliable support to me when I first became the president. That hadn't changed. However, a different feeling had started to grow inside me. I wasn't sure how Miller felt about it, but I believed she didn't dislike me. Or at least, I hoped so. It was a professional relationship, and I hadn't conveyed my feelings. But lately, I have been feeling frustrated about it. One day, my mother suddenly returned and visited the company.
Max, long time no see.
Mom, what brings you here all of a sudden?
Well, you know, your father said he's on a business trip to the US, so I decided to come along.
I see. So, Dad is in here today.
Yes, he is. How about the three of us have a meal together?
Sure. As I engaged in a lively conversation with my enthusiastic mother, Miller, who had prepared tea, entered from behind.
Please have a seat here.
Oh, Miller, thank you.
Not at all. There are no urgent matters for now, President, so please take your time.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Miller served tea for me and my mother, and then smiled kindly before returning to the secretary's office. Observing us, my mother's expression loosened into a sly smile.
Hey, is there something going on between you and Miller? When did that happen?
Well, it's not really like that.
Even if you say that with such a bright red face, it's not very convincing.
For some reason, my mother seemed to have noticed.
Miller doesn't seem entirely uninterested either. It's fine.
What? She nodded and then clapped her hands together and approached me.
It's fine. You two look great together. I'd be so happy if you both got together.
No, I mean,
Just let me talk to her for a bit.
Mom, my mother headed towards the secretary's office, bringing Miller along.
Do you have someone special? What do you think about Max?
Huh? What are you?
Don't hold back. I think of you as my own daughter. I'd be overjoyed if you two got together.
Sorry, my mother is just going off on her own. Despite my immediate apology, Miller also blushed as she looked at me. Though she could refuse, said, "Give me some time."
Understood. Max, do your best.
It's really enough already, so please stop. I sighed in frustration at my mother's interference. But my heart raced because Miller didn't refuse. Perhaps there's hope for me too. Thinking that, I became even more aware of it and felt flustered. I wonder if Miller felt something similar. The awkward atmosphere was frustrating, and a few days later, I confessed and we started dating. Of course, we are in a romantic relationship, but also president and exclusive secretary at the same time. Mixing business with personal matters wouldn't be good. So we separated work and personal life in our minds, and not much progress had been made. However, we went on dates and traveled together on our days off. It turned out that Miller had experience traveling abroad, and travel was a shared hobby. We looked forward to the time we spent together, thinking about where to go next on our days off more than anything else, and I wanted to be with her all the time. Miller,
President, what's wrong?
well, today is your birthday, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. But
One day, after work, I nervously called her and took out a small box.
what is this?
Seeing the box, she seemed to understand what was about to be said and swallowed hard, tears welling up in her eyes as she looked at me. Though my heart felt like it might burst from nervousness, I took a deep breath and spoke. I'm still immature, but I promise to make you happy. Would you marry me? As I presented the large diamond ring inside, she gently enveloped it with both her hands and said, "Yes, of course." I felt relieved and started to cry
Why are you crying, Max?
because I'm just so relieved. Thank you. And so, we officially became engaged. We decided to get married within the year and hold our wedding ceremony overseas next year. With our busy jobs, and now as an engaged couple, we couldn't travel around the world like we used to. But we found even greater happiness and fulfillment. Gazed at a photo of themselves, smiling on a postcard sent by my parents. Although they hadn't remarried, seeing my parents enjoying their retirement years together freely and lovingly made me think, we want to become a couple like them. With that goal in mind, we will continue to work hard together. Let me tell you right here and now about the outcome of your interview. Coming from a single parent in the middle of nowhere, you're bound to be useless, not hired. Your parents supposed to be dumb.
With those words and a laugh from the interviewer, Johnson, my worn resume fluttered to the ground. Clenching my fists on my lap, I mustered a response. I got it. Then, I stood up and left the room. I'm a 29-year-old woman, currently a part-time worker. After graduating from college, I quit a company I was working for last year. Now, I'm back home, helping my mom run the family farm. My dad passed away when my brother and I were young, and the farm was originally his. Life is more comfortable now, but it must have been a continuous struggle for my mom, managing the farm and raising us alone. That's why I felt a sense of inadequacy with how things were. When my brother started seriously considering taking over the farm, I wanted to repay my mom in a different way. I worked hard, graduated from a big-name university, and landed a job at a local company, which turned out to be a typical toxic workplace. So much overtime, working weekends often, and the boss's unreasonable demands were relentless. After more than 5 years, I quit due to physical and mental health issues. I was down after returning home, but slowly regained my spirits thanks to my mom and brother's encouragement. Thinking I couldn't stay this way, I restarted my job hunt. Why don't you just work here on the farm with your brother? My mom suggested, making me waver. But I knew I couldn't rely on them anymore. Sensing my dilemma, my mom, as if reading my mind, showed me employment information on her cell phone. It was a major food corporation based in a big city, similar to New York. According to her, they were hiring mid-career employees. This big of a company. I was hesitant, but after hearing my mom's reasoning and my brother's support, I applied. Somehow, I passed the document screening and found myself at the company for an interview. I never dreamed I'd be interviewing at such a big firm. Eck, I'm getting nervous. For a moment, I felt like running away, but I took a deep breath. At the reception, I asked for directions to the interview room for mid-career hiring. It seemed I was the last candidate for the day, and the waiting area was empty. Soon, the door opened, and a man who had just finished his interview came out. He had a gloomy expression. Did he have a tough time in there? Memories of my previous job flashed, but I shook them off. Entering the room, I saw 2 people seated. A man is in his late 30s, Johnson, and a woman about my age, Smith, sitting a bit away. After greeting each other and taking a seat, Johnson, the interviewer, and Smith, the note-taker, introduced themselves. The interview began, and Johnson frowned upon reviewing my resume.
Graduated from a famous university, huh? Why did you leave your last job?
I braced myself. I knew they would ask about my resignation. At my previous job, the workload and frequent weekend work affected my health, leading to my resignation. I prioritize work over myself due to my strong sense of responsibility. Now I'm recovered and ready to contribute, applying what I've learned. Before I could finish, Johnson burst out laughing.
What's this about strong responsibility? If you had that, you wouldn't have quit and would have stuck it out there.
His blunt words shocked me. And even Smith looked surprised at him. Johnson, unbothered, propped his cheek and flicked through my resume.
You can't manage yourself, can you?
I felt my cheeks burn at that moment, but I didn't intend to make excuses. You might be right. However, I intend to apply the lessons learned from why I resigned in my future work, I replied. As I said this, Smith nodded and typed on her keyboard. On the other hand, Johnson snorted in apparent disinterest.
Oh really? So, you look quite plain. Where are you from? What's your family like?
Johnson, that's...
Smith began to warn him against further questioning. But she hesitated, silenced by Johnson's stern look. Is my family background even relevant to this job? And calling me plain, how rude.
Oh, don't you want to answer? Got something to hide, maybe?
Johnson grinned at my hesitation. His words about hiding something struck a nerve. As if I have anything to hide. While internally rolling my eyes, I honestly answered that I come from a rural area, from a single-parent home with an older brother. Johnson started laughing again, his crude voice echoing in the quiet interview room.
Straight from the sticks. Quit your job because you couldn't take it, single parent and from the countryside. I totally get why you applied here.
What do you mean by that? I knew it wasn't going to be a good reason, but I asked anyway. Meanwhile, I turned my gaze to Smith. She had caught my attention. She hadn't been typing during Johnson's tirade. Realizing I was looking at her, she averted her eyes. Perhaps under some pressure from Johnson.
Don't you get it? Typical of someone raised by a single parent, lacking common sense. I pity you, no cultural knowledge or common sense. That's why you probably thought a big company like ours might hire you. Put yourself in our shoes.
After his relentless criticism, Johnson turned to Smith, right? But she just looked down silently.
Whatever.
Johnson scoffed, not getting the agreement he expected. I was trembling with anger. I was trying to stay calm, but it might have shown on my face. Johnson announced loudly,
Let me tell you right here and now about the outcome of your interview. Coming from a single parent in the middle of nowhere, you're bound to be useless, not hired. Your parent's supposed to be dumb.
Then, for some reason, he tore up my resume and threw it away. Pieces of what used to be my resume fluttered down. Who could have imagined such treatment and harsh words? I clenched my fists on my lap. I didn't mind being insulted, but I couldn't stand being ridiculed for my background and family by a stranger. Indeed, I quit my job once, regretted it, and felt down, but my family helped me regain a positive outlook. The anger inside me flared up even more. I got it. Then, I stood up and left the room. Right after stepping out, I took out my cell phone and made a call. He wanted to see my parents, huh? My mom answered quickly, concerned. What's up? Are you okay? She must have noticed the tremor in my voice. Just then, Johnson and Smith came out of the room. It seemed like it was indeed the last interview. Our eyes met firmly. Without looking away, I spoke to my mom on the phone. Mom, the interviewer is calling for you. Hearing my words, Smith looked puzzled, and Johnson burst into laughter again.
What? Did you call your mom? It seems you weren't independent from your mom. Typical of someone with no sense, raised by a single parent.
My mom seemed to hear Johnson's laughter and said, I'll be right there, before hanging up. I smiled confidently and replied, "My mom will be here shortly. You wanted to see her face, right?" My mom arrived in less than 5 minutes. Surprised, Johnson said, "Wait, you had your mom waiting at the main entrance." Typical of a single-parent upbringing, overprotecting and hence not nurturing common sense. He continued to throw insults at both of us. My mom narrowed her eyes, seeming to understand what had happened. Just as Johnson was about to spew more insults, he noticed someone standing behind my mom and froze.
President Mike, why are you here?
Johnson's reaction startled Smith as well. The man referred to as the president calmly explained,
Well, I was just talking with her. I thought I'd accompany her if there was any problem.
Johnson looked bewildered, wondering why my mom and the president were together. My mom explained, "I came to the city with my daughter. While she was interviewing, I was discussing business in the president's office. I also wanted to thank him personally for the interview opportunity." She handed out her business card. "That's why she could come to me so quickly after the call." Johnson's eyes widened upon seeing the business card.
What? You're the representative of that big farm we trade with?
He then looked at me intently. "Yes, I am the daughter of the farm's owner," I replied. Johnson stammered, "If you had told me you were the daughter of our trading partner." Our farm's produce, managed by my mom, had become a branded product due to years of hard work and was famous in our local area. It was even gaining national recognition. I found out when my mom suggested this company that my late father and the president were close both personally and professionally. When I returned home and started job hunting again, my mom mentioned it to the president during a business conversation, and he offered me to take the interview and test at his company. My mom had explained this to me, but I was hesitant. 'Cause I don't want to be seen as getting a job through connections. The president, knowing how I felt, didn't inform the interviewers that a trading partner's daughter was coming.
What's this all about?
Johnson was in disbelief at my explanation. While he was flustered, my mom and the president were chatting amicably.
The president has been looking after us since my husband passed away. I'm truly grateful.
Don't worry. Your husband was a great help to me, and it's not just that. It's because of the attractive produce you grow. Your farm has grown wonderfully. Your husband would be proud.
Listening to their conversation, I realized that although I knew my mom worked with various companies, I hadn't known she dealt with such a large corporation. My brother, being the successor, probably knew, but I had been oblivious until recently. The president turned to Johnson.
So, was there any problem?
No, sir, no problem at all. Right, Smith?
Johnson, looking desperate, sought agreement from Smith, who seemed confused and shifted her gaze.
You don't need to worry about causing trouble. Please tell me honestly.
The president encouraged gently. Smith, as if making up her mind, finally spoke up.
Johnson has been verbally abusive to all interviewees, including her, criticizing her appearance and single-parent upbringing. It's questionable behavior.
Johnson, furious, yelled, "You're lying," and reached out towards Smith. "What are you doing?" I quickly stepped in to protect her.
He also instructed me to only record what he wanted. I was afraid to disobey him. I'm so sorry.
Smith, seemingly having held back for a long time, tearfully exposed Johnson's actions from behind me. Finally, she handed the president a bag containing my torn resume. Johnson's face fell. Then I explained to my mom and the president 'cause they were wondering. He said me unfit for the job right here, saying a single parent, countryside upbringing made me useless. That's when he tore up my resume.
That's a lie. President, she's making it up. It's all false. She did it, not me.
Shaking my head at Johnson's attempt to shift the blame onto Smith even now, I approached the president and offered something. I recorded the interview. Please use this as evidence. I handed over a voice recorder. I had recorded the interview for personal review, thinking it would help if things didn't go well. Of course, I had no intention of posting it online, as that could be illegal.
You even recorded it?
Johnson looked defeated. According to Smith, the interview was originally supposed to be conducted by 3 people: Johnson, his supervisor, and Smith, the note-taker. However, his supervisor had to take leave due to a family emergency. There should have been another interviewer, but Johnson insisted on proceeding with just the 2 of them.
Johnson has always tried to find ways to be alone with me and made advances, which was really troubling.
You didn't need to mention that.
Johnson, flustered, raised his voice. Well, that's creepy. My mom, the president, and I all frowned in disapproval.
But why did you need to harass and insult my daughter?
My mom questioned Johnson. Reluctantly, Johnson admitted, I didn't like that she went to a better university than me. Indeed, Johnson had made a strange face when he looked at my resume. Surprised, I blurted out, "That's it." Johnson glared at me fiercely.
Yes, that's right. The guy before you, I didn't like his looks, so I rejected him on the spot, just like I did with you.
All this abuse and insult for just that. He had taken advantage of his supervisor's absence to reject candidates he didn't like, apparently as a stress reliever and to impress Smith. But showing such behavior certainly wouldn't win anyone's heart. For such childish reasons, you've hurled abuse and insults at others, as a professional. No, as a human being. How do you justify that? You labeled me as unreasonable for being raised by a single parent, but it seems to me you're far more unreasonable. I looked down at the speechless Johnson, while the president held his forehead, seemingly at a loss for words. The president then apologized to me, my mom, and Smith for the oversight. Remembering something, he asked, "By the way, Johnson, aren't you married?" Smith nodded in confirmation. He's married and was making advances on female employees. It must have been tough for Smith. Johnson slumped down, covering his face, overwhelmed with shame. Afterwards, I retook the interview and passed the test, securing my employment. I moved out of my family home and started living on my own again. Other candidates also had their interviews and tests redone, which was a relief. At the final interview, the president expressed his expectations. "I'm looking forward to working with you." As for Johnson, his inappropriate behavior during interviews, harassment of certain female employees, and other misconduct came to light, resulting in his transfer to a regional office. Rumor has it he's now divorced. As for Smith, who was the note-taker, we've become close friends, now calling each other by first names. I'm now working in a product development department, leading a busy yet fulfilling life. I'd be delighted to eventually work on products using vegetables from my mother's and brother's farm. To achieve that, I'm determined to work even harder.
Just like any other day, I finish up at work and hop on the usual train. After an 8-minute walk from my local station, I arrive home, the place I've been living in for nearly 20 years. I grab a bottle of beer from the fridge and snack on some chips as I enjoy a cold one. While half watching a variety show I'm not particularly interested in, my mind drifts to the same old thought. I wonder how those two are doing. There's no way for me to know, and even if I did, there's nothing I can do about it. But that's what I've been pondering for 20 years, day in and day out. The two people I'm referring to are my ex-wife, Jennifer, and my daughter, Michelle. In an ideal world, we'd still be a happy family of 3. Back then, I never doubted for a moment that such a future would come to pass. But somehow, our family ended up going our separate ways in a way none of us could have predicted. I met Jennifer 21 years ago. At that time, I was in the first year of moving to the big city from a poor, rural town to start my career as a salesperson. Jennifer, on the other hand, had just begun working as a secretary for her father, the president of a different design company. We were two people from different backgrounds and circumstances, with nothing in common except for the fact that we both lived in this bustling New York City. By all rights, we should have never crossed paths. We met on a rainy day. Caught off guard by a sudden downpour on my way home from work, I ducked into a nearby novelty shop to buy an umbrella. I really should have checked the weather forecast today, I mused while searching for an umbrella, but the shop had only cute pattern umbrellas. Finally, I found a simple lime green colored umbrella amidst the more whimsical options. Feeling somewhat out of place in the female-dominated store, I quickly made my way to the cashier. However, in haste, I wasn't paying enough attention and accidentally knocked my umbrella against a shelf. It was only after I heard the clatter that I realized I had dropped something. Looking in the direction of the noise, I noticed a small pendant had fallen to the floor, with part of its decoration coming loose and breaking. Man, I've done it now. I froze for a moment. These kinds of novelty shops can be surprisingly pricey, so paying for damages was going to hurt. Especially this month, when I was already strapped for cash after several nights out with my coworkers. Luckily or unluckily, nobody seemed to have noticed that I'd dropped the item. But still, I couldn't just leave it there after realizing I broke it. Reluctantly, I picked it up, intending to take it to the cashier. That's when it happened.
Excuse me, are you buying that pendant because you dropped and broke it?
Hearing that voice, I turned to look. And that was how I met Jennifer. Feeling a bit embarrassed that she noticed, I replied, "Oh, yes." When I said that, Jennifer's expression seemed to brighten noticeably. But when she said, "Great," I got a bit annoyed. Here I was, about to pay for something I had no intention of buying because I accidentally dropped it, and she's saying great. Then Jennifer seemed to realize how I felt and quickly added, "Oh, sorry, that's not what I meant. I've actually been wanting that pendant for a while. If it's okay with you, could I buy it off you?" I got the gist of it quickly, but I couldn't agree so easily. "Ah, but this is broken, you know." Even though it was just a part that had come off, I felt uncomfortable making someone else pay for something I had broken. Jennifer's offer was very much appreciated, but I had to decline at first. However, Jennifer, with a smile, said, "It's totally fine. We can fix it with glue. So I took her up on her offer. After we both finished paying, we ended up going outside the store together, and that's when Jennifer exclaimed in surprise, "Oh my, it's pouring rain." It hadn't been raining just 30 minutes before, so she must not have noticed. "Would you like to be in my umbrella to go to the station?" Those words came out so easily, I surprised even myself. But for some reason, I felt a desire to help her. Jennifer nodded happily, and we both huddled under her newly bought lime green umbrella. From there, things just flowed, and we exchanged contact information, starting a relationship 3 months later. It wasn't my first time dating a woman, but it was a first time I felt so at ease and could be my true self with someone. That's how irreplaceable Jennifer's presence had become to me. So, naturally, marriage was in my thoughts, and we even talked about it. Even without any concrete plans, I fondly remember how blissful it was to talk and imagine a life together as family with Jennifer. And then came our 1-year anniversary. As we were nearing our first year together, that day, I planned to propose to Jennifer. I was 24 years old and just 2 years into my career. It might have seemed a bit early, but if I was going to spend my life with someone, I couldn't imagine anyone other than Jennifer. However, that day, just before I could propose, Jennifer shared something completely unexpected.
"I think I'm pregnant."
Jennifer shared the news with a mix of joy and a little apprehension. I was surprised, sure, but almost entirely overwhelmed with happiness, and I joyfully presented the engagement ring I had prepared. Jennifer seemed surprised too, and there we were, both of us laughing through our tears. Just the thought of being incredibly happy with just the two of us, Jennifer and I, and now we were going to be 3 with our precious child on the way. How incredibly happy our future must be waiting for us. I still remember clearly thinking that way. But the end of that happiness came much sooner than I had anticipated. After proposing, we met each other's parents and started looking for a home to live in together. Jennifer was pregnant, so a wedding wasn't possible, but we still had happy and peaceful days. However, there was just one thing. Jennifer's parents were opposed to our marriage. Being the daughter of a CEO, Jennifer had always been encouraged to have an arranged meeting with the heir of a business associate. I didn't know about this situation, but even if I did, I couldn't imagine being separated from Jennifer. Especially since we already had our precious child on the way. So, without considering her parents' wishes, we chose a path akin to eloping. Looking back, I can help but wonder if a different future would have been possible had I tried harder to convince her parents. I often catch myself thinking that way. Half a year after making it official, our daughter Michelle was born without a hitch. She had Jennifer's striking round eyes and a little mole by her mouth, just like mine, which appeared soon after she was born. It was happy, but I felt awkward to see my features in her. But watching my child grow to resemble the woman I love was an indescribable joy. But then, one fateful day, a call came through on Jennifer's cell phone. It was a call from Jennifer's mother, bearing the news that her father had passed away. She had kept it a secret, not wanting to worry her only daughter, Jennifer. It seems he had been suffering from a terminal illness for several years, and that was the cause of his passing. Maybe all the insistence on arranged marriages and wanting her to marry a company heir was all out of concern for what would happen after he was gone. Even I, who was almost a stranger, couldn't help but think this way. So Jennifer must have had so many thoughts running through her mind. After attending the funeral with Michelle, who her father had never gotten the chance to meet, Jennifer remained downcast for a long time. Then, about a month later,
Please, let's get a divorce.
Jennifer said that, "Never in my wildest dreams did I expect such words, and of course, I tried to persuade her otherwise. But Jennifer wouldn't budge.
I couldn't give my dad peace of mind while he was alive. If my mom ends up feeling the same way, I won't be able to recover. I want to give my mom that peace. You've done nothing wrong. I'm truly, truly sorry."
Am I not good enough? Sure, I'm not a high earner, but I work diligently and should be able to provide a stable life for Jennifer and Michelle. If that's still not enough and she feels insecure, I'll work even harder. I don't mind working overtime or having no days off. I'm willing to live with my mother-in-law or even have her move in with us. I just wanted us three to live together, no matter what it took. However, even I tried to persuade her. Jennifer's heart was no longer with me. The happy future for the three of us that I envisioned was no longer here. If separating from me meant happiness for Jennifer and Michelle, then I had no choice but to comply. Realizing this, I tearfully chose the path of divorce. Now, 20 years have passed. I have no idea where they are or how they are doing. I'm still working at the same company, now as the head of the HR department. My work is fulfilling, but without someone to share my happiness with, it feels somewhat hollow. I wonder what kind of adult Michelle has become, now that she must be of age. Did she go to college? Has she started working? I hope she hasn't been hurt by any unkind adults. Recently, as the job applicants coming in for interviews have started to be around the same age as Michelle, I find myself thinking about this more and more. Then, one day, as I was reviewing resumes for the upcoming interviews, my hands froze. It was because I saw the name, Michelle Johnson. The name Michelle is quite common in her generation, and the last name Johnson is different from Jennifer's maiden name. Besides, the odds of my daughter coincidentally coming in for an interview at the company where I work in HR are practically non-existent. Even though I know better, seeing that name still makes me react involuntarily. Knowing it was someone else, I couldn't help but read Michelle Johnson's resume a little more carefully than usual.
The person I admire the most is my mother. She's always aware of my mood and encourages me. Should I be hired by your company, I'll not only dedicate myself to my tasks but also aim to create a pleasant and cooperative workplace by paying attention to my colleagues.
Reading those words, I couldn't help but think of Jennifer. Jennifer was always so bright and kind. Surely, she would have enveloped Michelle, her daughter, in the same warm kindness. Our company doesn't require photos with resumes, but I found myself eagerly anticipating meeting Michelle Johnson, who was supposed to be a stranger. And then the following week came. "Next, please." When I said that, there was a polite knock on the door, and a job-seeking student walked in. Dressed in a new suit and with a nervous look on her face, I was taken aback for a moment, because standing there was the spitting image of Jennifer. I quickly glanced at the resume in front of me. There, the name Michelle Johnson was written. Could it be She's that Michelle. As my mind raced, she looked at me curiously. Oh, excuse me. Are you Michelle Johnson? Yes, I am Michelle Johnson from Southeast Vocational School. Thank you for having me today, she said politely. Her crisp manner of speaking somehow reminded me of Jennifer. It crossed my mind that the person in front of me could be my daughter, whom I hadn't seen in 20 years. At that thought, a strange sweat broke out, and I started to feel tense. But she probably couldn't even dream that I might be her father. So, I figured it was best to keep my cool as the interviewer. In a short time, I decided to act as normally as possible. I'm the interviewer for today, from the HR department. My name is Nathan Williams. It's nice to meet you. With the usual words spoken, I finally calmed down and looked at her face. And then, those round, wide-open eyes so like Jennifer's, a small but high nose, and the mole by the mouth, just like mine. All of it made me think, that's definitely Michelle. No doubt about it. I was almost certain. Still, I can't just blurt out that I'm her father to her during an interview. I ask about her motivation for applying, what qualifications she has, and what she learned at school. Just like a regular interview, I ask these questions while keeping my composure. Yet, there's so much more I really want to know. Where does she live now? Is Jennifer doing well? What kind of memories has she made growing up? What foods does she like, and what activities does she find most enjoyable? A day wouldn't be enough to ask all I want to know about Michelle. But this is an interview, and there's another interviewer beside me. I can't say anything that might jeopardize Michelle's chances of getting hired. But to part ways after finally reuniting after 20 years.
Nathan, is there anything else you'd like to ask?
My colleague's question left me thinking. There's too much I want to ask, but I couldn't come up with a clever way to do it. No, I don't have any further questions. After my response, my colleague said, then we'll conclude our questions. If Johnson has any self-promotion to add, please go ahead. Despite having all the time in the world to think, during the 20 years I was alone, I never imagined we'd reunite like this, and now I can't seem to do anything with this golden opportunity. I felt utterly helpless and pitiful. After finally seeing her again for the first time in 20 years, is this how it's going to end? I was lost in these thoughts when Michelle began to speak.
In my resume, I mentioned that I respect my mother. My parents divorced when I was young, and she quickly remarried. My stepfather was very strict, and we had our fair share of troubles, but my mother was always my ally. I just adore her. She's strong and kind.
I had read her resume very carefully, but hearing Jennifer speak about it brought tears to my eyes. How much struggle had they gone through without me knowing? Here I was, thinking I was the unfortunate one left alone, while Jennifer and Michelle, living together, were the fortunate ones. But maybe that wasn't necessarily the case. I tried my best to keep my composure, not letting Michelle or any colleague notice the effort it took. Perhaps Michelle held some resentment towards me, not having mustered the courage to talk to Jennifer's father before he passed away, failing to come up with a better way to help Jennifer when she was struggling. After being absent for 20 years, it wouldn't be surprising if they harbored some resentment. These thoughts made me fearful of hearing what Michelle would say next. Then, Michelle reached into her pocket and pulled something out.
This is a charm my mom gave me when I came of age. It's something precious that played a part in my mom and dad meeting each other. She told me that as I step into adulthood, it would surely be something that protects me.
That was the pendant from when I first met Jennifer. The broken part remained unfixed all this time. Yet, Jennifer had kept that unsightly pendant with her all along.
I was separated from my real father when I was just a baby, so I don't have any memories of him. But when I have this pendant with me, I feel like my father is watching over me. That's why I brought it today. I was really nervous.
Michelle, who was supposed to be talking about her personal strengths, suddenly started sharing her life story. My colleague, another interviewer, seemed puzzled by what was happening. But me, I couldn't listen without tearing up, and I found myself looking down. Could it be that Michelle has realized that I'm her father? With such an improbable hope, I listened.
I'm sorry for talking so long.
Michelle said, snapping back to her brisk self, a stark contrast to her earlier demeanor. It was just my wishful thinking that she had recognized me. I thought at that moment.
But maybe this really is a charm.
Michelle indeed said that, flashing a smile at me. Michelle closed the door. Michelle was the last interviewee of the day.
The last one was a bit unique, wasn't she? She seemed very outspoken and nice though.
My colleague mentioned that, but I had no time to respond. My feet were moving on their own. With a loud bang, I opened the door and hurried down the hallway. I could still see Michelle's silhouette. Michelle. As I ran after her, Michelle slowly turned to face me. Tears were pooling in her eyes. I was surprised that she looked just like her mom, Jennifer, even in tears. Without thinking, I blurted out, "Michelle. One wrong step, and I totally look like a creep."
To think I'm really meeting my dad. This is just too much of a blessing.
Michelle was sobbing as she said that, and I just couldn't help but hug her. Holding Michelle, who had grown so much since she was a baby, felt surreal. The years we hadn't seen each other made their presence felt, whether I liked it or not. Needless to say, I got some weird looks from a coworker who had witnessed the scene until I cleared up the misunderstanding. I heard later that Jennifer, after divorcing me, had indeed remarried through an arranged meeting, just like Mimel had said. However, it turned out to be an unhappy marriage due to her husband's abusive behavior, and they divorced after a few years. It seems that Jennifer had kept our family photos, and because Michelle had seen those, she recognized me. I had resigned myself to being hated or forgotten, so learning this was incredibly joyful. At the same time, it reignited a strong desire to see Jennifer again. When I mustered the courage to talk to Michelle about it, amazingly, after 20 years, the three of us were reunited. Now, a year later, we are living together again as a family. Although Michelle didn't get hired at the company after they learned about our family connection, I'm truly glad these days of being together have come in this way. The happy future I thought had disappeared 20 years ago was certainly a long way off, but it was indeed here. I am now deeply grateful for the unbroken bond of our family.